Introduction of bills. The Probation of Offenders Amendment Bill 2026 in the name of the Minister of Justice. Public business. Private members' business. Motions.
Honorable members, the debate on the following motion, which was in progress, and the Senate adjourned on Tuesday, February the 24th, 2026, will be resumed. Be it resolved that the Senate call upon the government to table in Parliament within the next 12 months a comprehensive national strategic plan inclusive of a legislative framework to eliminate these barriers to social and economic exclusion, thereby enabling all persons to participate fully in public life with dignity and independence. Honorable Senators, on the last two occasions, Wednesday, November the 26th, 2025, and Tuesday, February 24th, 2026, there was a total of 13 speakers on this motion. I think the last member to speak on this motion was the Minister of Labor and Microenterprises. Anybody else would like to join the debate? Senator KYRON, please.
Mr. President, I rise today to make my maiden contribution in this honorable Senate. Mr. President, I do it with a sense of humility and a sense of deep responsibility. I thank you for the opportunity to participate in this debate of national importance. I would also like to thank my political leader, the Honorable Penelope Beckles-Robertson, for the confidence that she has placed in me to provide the feedback and to provide my experiences to this honorable House. I'd also like to acknowledge the mover of this motion, Senator Alicia Lalit Etienne, for bringing forward a matter that speaks directly to equality, dignity, and national development. Mr. President, I stand in full support of this motion. And I do so not only as a senator, Mr. President, but as someone who lives the reality this motion seeks to address. I'd like to ask myself or ask this question to a group of people or anyone who I actually encounter, because I'm not certain that people fully understand how simple things could affect the lives of people living with disabilities. All of us in this chamber here today would have possibly got up, got ready, put on your suit, straighten your tie, got in your vehicle, and come down to the Senate. For somebody like me, Mr. President, and for people like myself, this is a calculated dance where you have to depend on loved ones, depend on friends, depend on family to get you to the point where you have to be. So we should not be in a position where we always take things for granted. And I believe this is one of the reasons why the motion was brought forward. Mr. President, this motion begins in Section 4 of our Constitution. It guarantees equality before the law. It guarantees equality and treatment by public authorities, and it guarantees freedom of movement. It guarantees enjoyment of property. And these are not abstract ideas, Mr. President. These are real rights. The Equal Opportunity Act strengthens those rights as it prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability and places a duty on public authorities to ensure equal access to services and facilities. So the legal foundation already exists, Mr. President. The Constitution speaks, the law speaks, but the lived experience of persons with disabilities tell us something else. There remains a wide gap between rights on paper and access in practice. Mr. President, I live with a condition called arthrogryposis multiplex congenita. Very fancy word, basically just to say that I'm a very good-looking person, Mr. Speaker. I mean, I cannot be untruthful. This is Honorable House. This is something that I have been able to navigate my entire life, as I mentioned before, with the help of friends and families. And I do not raise this to invite any sympathy. I raise it to provide only context. Because when we speak about barriers, I live those barriers. Barriers in buildings, barriers in transportation, barriers in attitude, and barriers in employment. Mr. President, I want to stop on employment a little bit and bring a little bit of my personal experience to this Honorable House. My first major job was in a company, an oil and gas company, one of the larger oil and gas companies in Trinidad and Tobago, because my profession is within the IT background, the IT field. And I was hired by someone who was able to look past the physical attributes of who you see before you and think about the actual ability of the person. And that person is someone that I'm sure a lot of us here are familiar with. A gentleman by the name of Mr. Rushton Parry, former Member of Parliament for Mayara. One of the best Member of Parliament from Mayara that I know about right now. And there are times when something as simple as a step to an entrance becomes a wall. I remember this afternoon, and I must say thanks to the members of the Parliament staff who were so meticulous in every aspect of my visit today. From asking what side of the lectern should the pen be placed, to wondering, can you climb those stairs? And these are the simple principles that we should all live to follow and mirror. I should not have to come to such an establishment like this and feel like this sort of action is foreign. Because, Mr. President, it's something that we should all be accustomed to. There are times when a narrow doorway becomes an exclusion. Some of us may never have the opportunity to worry about the place that I'm going. I wonder if it's accessible enough for me to pass. There are times when inaccessible parking determines whether participation is possible at all. You have to worry, I wonder if I could go this little line, but where can I park? Is it possible to park? How far away will I have to walk away from the park to get to the venue? These are all daily realities. The Equal Opportunity Act is something that we all should use in a way to draw inspiration from. Because it doesn't only speak to people with disability, it speaks to everyone in the country, it speaks to all residents, all citizens. And it's something that we all may just topple over and not really take into consideration, but it's very important that we remember that these things are here to protect us. Mr. President, there remains a wide gap between rights on paper and access in practice. And while I have been fortunate to overcome many of these challenges, the truth is that many persons with disabilities may not get the same opportunities, Mr. President. This is why this motion matters. It moves us from goodwill to guarantee, from accommodation to obligation, and from sympathy to equality. Mr. President, this motion identifies barriers in employment, housing, education, and public access. And these barriers are real, Mr. President. Persons with disabilities still face limited employment opportunities, not because they lack the ability, but because workplaces are not designed for inclusion. Housing remains inaccessible. Many developments don't even consider mobility challenges because it's always an afterthought. And the only members of the society who suffer because of afterthought are members of the differently abled society, Mr. President. Educational institutions often lack adaptive tools, accessible infrastructure, or learning support. How many times have you heard teachers, and I know a lot of great teachers, I'm not knocking teachers because they have a lot to deal with, but how many times have you heard a teacher say, boy, that child miserable. He talking all the time, he can't stay quiet. And these are things that if untrained, you will be unable to determine that this child possibly has a learning disability. And because of that, there's a possibility of this child being left behind. Public buildings remain difficult to enter, navigate, or use. And these barriers can create exclusion. Mr. President, I was a local government representative in the Mayor-Riopa Regional Corporation for 2 terms. And the chamber of the regional corporation was on the 2nd floor. I had no problems climbing the stairs to go to the chamber, to go to these meetings. But you have to think, you have to wonder, what about the other people within this community who wants to be a part of the process, who wants to attend a statutory meeting and cannot attend that statutory meeting because of those 8, 9 stairs? Yeah, I counted them. And each one of those steps, Mr. President, represents one more roadblock in the way of someone exercising the right to be a part of this community. And it is because of institutions like where I was at the regional corporation and sadly other institutions, whether they be private or public, there is always an afterthought for people with disabilities. And this is an attitude that we must change, Mr. President. Mr. President, exclusion also has a national economic cost. When persons with disabilities cannot access education, the country loses skilled workers. When they cannot access employment, the country loses productivity. When accessibility is not built into infrastructure, retrofitting, putting a ramp after, there's a cost to that. And that's because of the afterthought. Inclusion is not charity, Mr. President. Inclusion is also economics. An inclusive society expands the labor force, it increases consumption, encourages entrepreneurship, and reduces dependency. Accessibility is smart economic policy. Mr. President, there's also an international dimension that we could consider. Investors today examine governance, inclusion, and accessibility as part of doing business. If Trinidad and Tobago lacks these frameworks, we're putting ourselves at risk of losing out on a lot of opportunities. If we lack standards, investors see uncertainty. If accessibility is inconsistent, international firms may create their own compliance structures, influencing the cost by increasing it. Accessible countries are easier to invest in. Inclusive economies attract global companies. Barrier-free infrastructure signals modern governance. So this motion is not only a social policy, it is an investment policy. Mr. President, recently in social media, I don't think it was in the news, but we saw a public official misuse a designated parking space for people with disabilities. And Mr. President, this one strikes a nerve, especially for me, because, Mr. President, as we all can see, I am a resident. I'm a citizen who is differently abled. I'm also a driver. And Mr. President, do you know when I go to these areas that have handicap parking, I refuse to use those parking spots because I believe that I still have enough strength to walk 10 steps and leave that spot for somebody who needs it. These spaces are not a convenience, Mr. President. They are access. Without them, participation, as I mentioned before, becomes impossible. When such rules are ignored, it reflects a lack of understanding and realities of people like myself live with disabilities. If we cannot respect something as visible as a parking space, we will struggle to implement national accessibility policies. Policies must be supported by awareness. Awareness must be supported by enforcement. As a member of the disabled community, Mr. President, I call upon the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to do their duty and charge that public official under the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act. Mr. President, it cannot be rules for thee, not for me. Because if I, as a normal citizen before today, could look at a parking spot, park there and say, that's all right, if other people could do it, if people who I look up to, if someone who is supposed to be in the halls that makes these rules and enforce them can do it, so can I, Mr. Chairman. So that's why it's very important. Mr. President, this is why this motion calls for a comprehensive national strategic plan within 12 months. Because a piecemeal action, will not work. We need national accessibility standards, we need code requirements, we need public sector compliance rules, we need accessible transportation planning, we need digital accessibility standards, we need enforcement and mechanisms, we need timelines, and most of all, we need accountability. Only a structured national plan can deliver this. Mr. President, as I make my maiden contribution, I am conscious that my presence here should not be unusual. It should become the norm. A truly inclusive society is one where participation by persons with disability is expected and not exceptional. I stand here because barriers were overcome, but many others remain outside rooms just like this, not because of ability, but because of access, Mr. President. It seeks to replace barriers with opportunity. It seeks to replace exclusion with participation. It seeks to replace dependency with independence. Mr. President, this motion is grounded in our Constitution. It's supported by law and it's justified by economics. It's required for investment. It's necessary for equality. And for me, Mr. President, it's personal. It's personal because I understand what it means to have barriers in your way, Mr. President, and I understand how important it is when those barriers are removed. Trinidad and Tobago can do better. We can build a society where accessibility is standard, where inclusion is deliberate, where equality is real. I therefore lend my full and unequivocal support to this motion. Mr. President, I thank you.
Honorable Senators, on your behalf, I would like to warmly congratulate Senator KYRON James on his maiden contribution. Thank you very much, Senator KYRON.